Supporters of Niger's military junta have rallied against foreign interference in the capital as the country marks its Independence Day. Protesters waved Russian flags as they demanded the immediate withdrawal of French troops stationed in Niger. Western countries, as well as several of Niger's neighbours, have condemned the recent coup. The West African regional group ECOWAS has imposed tough economic sanctions and is threatening military action. Neighbouring Nigeria has also pushed up the pressure by cutting off power. And now coup leader Abdourahamane Tchiani used an Independence Day address to condemn the threats of military intervention.
What has particularly surprised Nigerians is the statement from the government of the partner country threatening Niger with the use of force to protect its citizens, diplomatic representation and interests in Niger, even though they have never been subjected to any threat. How can a question of maintaining order following peaceful street demonstrations provoke such an excessive reaction from political authorities at the highest level? At this point, one can rightly wonder whether it is just and humane for a government to order the use of military force against the Nigerian population to protect its own citizens.
Let's bring in West Africa correspondent Olisa Chukuma, who is covering this from neighboring Nigeria. Olisa, we just heard there Niger's self-declared coup leader sounding like he's not planning on backing down. How serious could a conflict become, even militarily, perhaps, with West Africa's regional bloc, ECOWAS? Is it unavoidable at this point?
Well, Sarah, perhaps it is in some diplomatic sense, because though the self-appointed coup leader in Niger right now is not backing down, he's talking tough. There are negotiations, simultaneous negotiations going down in the country with delegations from ECOWAS led by former Nigerian military head of state himself there alongside the Sultan also there, in the country to see what they can mediate, while at the same time ECOWAS chiefs, defense chiefs are also in Nigeria's capital Abuja, also looking at what options that they may have, which with indications suggest that military intervention might be the last option. So it is quite avoidable if they follow the diplomatic route, although we can also say that while you have that on one hand, on the other hand, you have the number 2 man of the junta currently now in Mali, speaking with the Malian, junta regime there. So you're asking that it looks like both Niger and ECOWAS are exploring all forms of support that they can, they have on their table at their disposal. But hopefully it will be avoidable to avoid, it will be good to avoid violence.
We've been hearing about some protests, some demonstrations taking place amid what is Independence Day today in Niger, which marks the nation's independence from France back in 1960. What's expected?
How ironic, you have to say, Sarah, just 1 week after the coup again, and now they have Independence Day. Well, protests have begun, demonstrations have begun, although not as violent. We expect it not to be as violent as we saw last week when, French embassy was attacked and vehicles and stuff were burned. But we hope it's going to be a peaceful demonstration. They will mark their Independence Day in the capital. There will be civil societies in the country have called for people to come out and demonstrate. But there's also the whole issue of, waving the Russian flag, which also raises the flag, more eyebrows, because if this is supposed to be the celebration and marking of their independence, then we're supposed to see Nigerian flags rather than, Russian flags and anti-French sentiment. So we hope it doesn't descend into that. But protests and demonstrations expected all throughout the capital, Niamey, today in Niger.
DW West Africa correspondent Olisa Chukuma, thank you. Niger is just the latest country in Africa's unstable Sahel region to see an overthrow of its government. Here's more.
Niger's status as one of the few democracies in the Western Sahel appears to be going up in smoke. The African nation adds its name to a list of countries in the region that have witnessed coups in recent years. Niger joins neighbouring Mali, which saw the military stage a mutiny in 2020. In 2021, a second coup took place there. That same year, Guinea and Chad also witnessed their leaders being overthrown. In Burkina Faso, there were 2 coups in 2022. The instability, caused in large part by militant Islamist groups, has caused particular concern to democracies across the region, and especially to those in the bloc of countries that form part of the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS. Anchored by Africa's most populated country, Nigeria, ECOWAS also serves as a peacekeeping force. During times of political instability and unrest, member states send joint military forces to intervene. But the most potent tool in the ECOWAS arsenal is its ability to suspend member states from its economic grouping. Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and now Niger have all been suspended following coups. Niger's junta has been given an ultimatum by ECOWAS too. It has threatened the possible use of force. There are fears that any military intervention in Niger by ECOWAS could descend into a full-scale war in the region, with Mali and Burkina Faso both warning they would defend their fellow coup leaders. And the effectiveness of an ECOWAS force has been questioned by experts who say adequate funding is required if it were to have a chance of succeeding. Plus, it could lead to a worsening of an already dire humanitarian crisis in the region.
And we are joined now by Kabir Adamu. He is with us from Abuja. He is a security analyst with Beacon Consulting. Welcome to the program, and thank you so much for joining us. We just saw in that report power had been seized in Mali, Burkina Faso, now Niger. Why have governments in the Sahel been so vulnerable to coups?
Good morning, Sarah. So essentially, it's a question of legitimacy. The way they emerged during, elections. So that also speaks about the authenticity and the electoral process in most African countries, and in this instance in West African countries, where the outcome of the elections are questioned. And then, of course, governance, where governance does not necessarily translate to meeting the needs and desires of the people. And then we can also extend it to the entire democratic system, how that system has not been able to address the needs and to meet the interests of the people. Sadly, we should also speak about the post-colonial legacies that countries like France have led. The system that France maintained in West Africa and other African countries has seen France very instrumental in these 3 components that I've mentioned, in governance, in elections. And sadly, because the effect is not being felt by the people, they most times question the legitimacy of those governments, and the result is the coup that we're seeing.
It's been said and speculated that Russia might be seeing an opportunity here for increased influence. How vulnerable is Niger to falling under more influence from Russia and its Wagner mercenary group?
So extremely vulnerable. Niger is dependent on foreign aid to meet its basic needs. And if the foreign aid coming from, countries in the Western countries, the US, the EU as a bloc, and then bilateral ones from France and even Germany as an example, if that is cut off, Nigerian government cannot survive on its own. And so it would look towards countries like Russia. Now, the argument is Russia is facing its own sanctions as a result of its invasion of Ukraine. So how much can it extend to countries like Niger? It's also increasingly desirous of maintaining a good relationship with a partner like Nigeria as an example. And Nigeria is the regional hegemon in ECOWAS. Russia would not want to do anything to destabilize that relationship. So I see Russia playing more of a stabilizing role than necessarily a destabilizing role. It would be interested in forming some form of relationship with Niger, but not at the detriment of its relationship with a country like Nigeria.
Meantime, we've been seeing European countries evacuating their citizens. We've been seeing West Africa's regional bloc, ECOWAS, imposing sanctions, Nigeria cutting electricity supply, foreign aid being cut, et cetera. I mean, this is really a lot of pressure when we talk about, what the situation that the coup leaders will be left with. Can they withstand that pressure?
So that depends on the current geopolitics. One of what kind of worries me when 2 days ago, the military junta announced the reopening of borders with some countries. It included Algeria. And that speaks a lot, because if a country like Algeria does not support this international stand, then it leaves the junta some opportunity, really, in the terms that Algeria is an opening to the North African corridor, as it were, and then by extension to Russia as well. So a lot will depend on how ECOWAS as a bloc, and then of course the international community is able to get the support of blocs in North Africa, the Arab countries as an example, countries like Turkey, and then more importantly, Russia and China. Now, if that support is gotten, then yes, the pressure will be enormous on the military junta. If, however, the bloc and the world is not able to get the support of this country that I've mentioned, then the pressure will ease on the military junta.
Kabir Adamu, security analyst, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.